Coogs House. The Houston Cougars are heading to Las Vegas. How will that change the entire dynamic of the Hoops program?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, to break down all things Cougs. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comment section down below or wherever you found this podcast, whether you call them flip-flops, sandals, or something else. A bunch of fun answers to that question at various households I've gotten to be a part of. Today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. More on that fun and competitive game in a second, but it is an addicting competitive game. You get to win a lot. Anyway, more on that later. All kinds of fun stuff to talk about today. I want to talk about some sports viral conversations that I think are particularly fun thought experiments for the University of Houston. I want to talk about feeling a little bit nostalgic about one Marcus Sasser. And last but not least, I want to make sure we open up the show today by talking about the Houston Cougars going to Las Vegas. Now, in a Dennis Dodd article that came out on CBS on Tuesday, it seems all but confirmed that this November there will be a large Players Era Festival, NIL-style basketball tournament with all kinds of other music and attractions and stuff happening around it in Las Vegas. Looks like it's going to be the week of Thanksgiving, 26th, 7th, and 9th. Obviously taking a day off for Turkey Day. I have to say this has me excited for a lot of different reasons. On the first and foremost, this is a large-scale NIL event. All 8 programs invited, assuming this whole thing goes off and gets all the clearance that it should, will get $1 million apiece in NIL payout. That's massive, right? That's $100,000 per kiddo. That's a lot of cash. And frankly, like, automatically kind of shifts the entire idea of, like, you don't have walk-ons. Just by signing up for this tournament, those guys' schools paid for by the NIL money from the tournament. It's a dramatic shift in how the program will function. Big time NIL get potentially. Now, this is not an official multi-team event or an MTE. NCAA has different sanctions and rules on how many of those you can be in and how many years in a row that is. And they're being very specific not to put this in that category. So you could theoretically play in this multiple years in a row, where unless you win the Invitational, you're not supposed to be able to play in, with the occasional exceptions because of the way the COVID years worked out. You're not supposed to be able to play in things like Maui in back-to-back years, right? The Maui Invitational, stuff like that, right? The goal here is to kind of build up an annual tradition in Las Vegas, right? So you'd want the same teams every year, and thus they're actually trying to make it not an MTE, distinct difference there. It's being put on by Everwonder Studio, financially being backed by Redbird International Media. They have not mentioned broadcast rights yet as far as who would get this. This would not be conference games, so it wouldn't be under the Big 12 jurisdiction. It'd be something a little bit different. Honestly, the way things are going in the future, this being over the Thanksgiving weekend, like all kinds of TV stuff tied up in college football that week, the last week of the regular season. For most conferences, you'll probably see a lot of streaming numbers and names thrown around as well. That is obviously the future. A lot of cash there. Looking at a couple different locations in Las Vegas, T-Mobile, MGM Grand Garden, the Mick Ultra Arena is also included. Right now, it looks like the 8 teams for next November, assuming this thing goes off without a hitch, are Houston, Alabama, Notre Dame, Oregon, Rutgers, San Diego State, and Texas A&M. That's all, I guess, a little fluid, but it does sound like Houston's at the core of this. Sampson even made some references to Las Vegas. It sounds like at spring meetings as well. And so I think it's worth saying that, like, this is something Houston's very interested in, very involved in getting off the ground. And for what it's worth, the tournament or the playing, whatever you want to call it, is not even necessarily dead set on just being a 1 year thing and not growing. The targets actually have 16 teams involved by November of 2025, and kind of getting to some sort of a World Cup type of, can you make it a full week long, and bracket play and pool play and all those different kinds of aspects of it. The 2025 roster, if Houston can get in that as well, being in 2024 would help. They're looking like they're trying to add some like the more traditional blue bloods to the mix there. Big time opportunities across the board. Now, these are the weekdays, looking at the weekdays, the week that people are off for Thanksgiving break, schools are off for Thanksgiving break, and you're also wrapping up college football. And the goal here is to have an NBA All-Star sized event, per a source within the deliberations, reported by Dodds, I should point out again, to have a NBA All-Star sized event to kind of kick off the real start of college basketball season. Really, really phenomenal idea. And I love that the NIL opportunity is there for kids to make money on this, and you know, obviously get compensated for a week worth of basketball on one of what they're trying to create to be, anyway, one of the biggest stages in all the sport. I also think it's worth pointing out that they're not just like going to let the kids play and just like sit around Vegas for the whole time. It looks like they're even trying to work in different types of programming to kind of help kids develop and learn, including things like financial literacy classes and programming for kids that would be required for schools involved. I think that's a phenomenal idea. It's a great way to sell this as like what we want college sports to be, is educating kids. And we know that they're getting paid on name, image, and likeness now, and that this is becoming more professionalized. What better way to educate them than to explain and work with them about best practices and ways to use these large checks that they're starting to get because of the talents they've accrued, right? It's a great opportunity. It's brilliant. It sets Houston apart, right? I know A&M is also involved, but when looking at recruiting in the Big 12 or recruiting in this region, Houston's kind of one of the few that gets to pull this kind of a card. It's the NIL money recruits itself too there. It's a great thing for Houston basketball, and getting involved in this potentially annual event at the start, being at the ground level, this only works positively for Houston. You're playing top-end programs. You're doing it in a marquee location. Your kids are getting paid to do it. It's going to quickly become, because the way they're trying to talk about getting this on all the television networks, stuff like that, and working out these deals and figuring out where the best prices are, best money coming in are for those, very suddenly you're looking at like, oh, this is a massive recruiting tool, right? You're talking like kid in class of 2025, like, yeah, you can go to UT Austin, you can go to Baylor and Waco, you can go to whatever. We're going to play in front of God and everybody in Las Vegas. And while you're getting paid to do that, you're also going to get taught things about how to spend your money wisely. And that's to start the season. That doesn't even include Big 12 play. That didn't even include the pro pipeline that Kelvin Sampson is building. That didn't even include the success the program's having, any of that. Just on its surface, it's this massive chip to put on the table when you're pitching a recruit. It's tremendous. It's incredible. It's an incredible opportunity. And I cannot express how wild, if you went back to 2018, both because of where Houston was and where college sports were, and said that this would be where we were by the fall of 2024, I might have just walked away. I don't know. I seriously, the idea that we're getting to the point where we're not just going to compensate kids for their talents, compensate kids for playing on the floor in this NIL tournament, but also help educate them about best practices with their cash on top of that. This is win, 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 win. This is all good, folks. This is a big time thing for the program. Programs continue to move forward. You're talking about like, how can Houston build off of winning a Big 12 regular season and being an ankle injury away from what might have been a Final Four run last year, aside from staying healthy, which is a goal. This is how that works. Obviously, when that gets written in pen, we'll be on the show to talk about it. It's an exciting time for the Houston Cougars, exciting time for Las Vegas, frankly, and exciting time to watch the NIL stuff get put to work in a way that helps out Houston. Big time news. Now, I want to talk some about some nostalgia. We're talking about Houston Cougar basketball. I want to talk about something that got me a little nostalgic on Tuesday in regards to Marcus Sasser. But first, we're talking about Houston becoming a well-oiled machine. And I know you've got one of those at home too. And passion, drive, and patience are the formula for building winning championships and winning championship teams, but it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because at eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. All the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, so on Tuesday, I was feeling particularly nostalgic about Marcus Sasser basketball and his time as a Houston Cougar. And so I wanted to talk about his year in Detroit. Now, admittedly, my nostalgia is fueled by a couple different things. It's not just completely out of thin air random, although there are times where it feels like that. On the one hand, Detroit Piston an official social media account to put out a bunch of content around Marcus on Tuesday. It was just kind of their way to look back at the season. It was a series of clips and highlights of his statistics, things he did well, yada, 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 right? Clear to say they like him up in Detroit. Who wouldn't, right? Who wouldn't? So that was the first thing. The second thing is I'm a big fan of basketballnews.com. Nekias Duncan's a great writer over there. The Dunker Spot they have is a great podcast. They also have Rex Chapman and a bunch of other guys are there, good basketball stuff. They put out, it's a pro basketball site, I should point out, pro men's and women's basketball. They put out a top steals of the 2023 draft, which was a reflective piece. It looked back, the series of writers looked back at the 2023 NBA draft and based on the season they had, who had the biggest steal and most value for their pick. And they had Marcus Sasser in the top 5. Marcus Sasser, you remember, went 25th overall to Detroit last year. Detroit went out and got him. They had to move up to go get him, right? Did sound like, based on things that were rumbling around that draft time, that people wanted him in that late first-round spot. Being in the top 5 in this list for basketballnews.com with some very established writers indicates more that, on just value perspective, getting Marcus at the 25th pick is kind of nuts. And for what it's worth, he was Detroit's second pick of the first round, and it's still kind of nuts. Now, looking back at the year he had, what made him that steal of a pick is he played Houston Cougar basketball at the NBA level. His average is 8.3 points per game, 3.3 assists per game, 37.3% from three, and played about 19 minutes a night, right? That maybe doesn't just jump off the screen in a way, right? When you factor in the progression he had over the course of the season and how those things were constantly increasing, and frankly, some of the scoring performances he had in that latter part of the season, I think it's safe to say that, oh, wait a second, this guy really did show up and play very, very well. For instance, he had 7 different games with 20 or more points and 10 different games where he hit 4 or more threes. That's really, really, I don't mean to obviously it's really, really good. I was about to say that, but it's really obvious. I think the bigger indicator is in the last 10 games of the season, he had more than 10 points in 8 of them. He had more than 20 points in 3 of them, right? Like, he was getting better as the year went on, and with more minutes in that time, because he was getting more minutes at that time after a couple injuries they'd had earlier in the season, he played really, really well, right? I should also point out in that 10 game stretch there, he missed some time, hurt himself. Looks like illness actually, but anyway, really, really impressive first season out the gates. 21 different games. He played 25 or more minutes. He played 25 more minutes in the last 20 games of the season in all but two different games. Again, they really relied on him in the latter part. He grew into that role. He earned that over the course of the season. I would point out, as far as looking at highlights and whatever, that's also really cool to me. I think it's really cool, I should say, that in terms of plus or minus. Now, plus or minus is not a perfect stat. It's a way to track basically when you check into the game, what's the score? When you check out of the game, what's the score? The difference between those two is your plus or minus for your time in the game. And that means you're theoretically having an impact on the score and winning and losing and so on and so forth. The best plus or minus game that Marcus had was a plus 20, meaning that in the minutes he was on the floor, in which he played 32 and a half minutes, in the minutes he was on the floor, Detroit won by 20 points, right? Won those minutes by 20 points. That was against Dallas in Dallas. Now, that's particularly important because that's Marcus's hometown, right? From Red Oak, South Dallas suburb. He shot 9 of 20 from the field, got a bunch of shots in the air, had 24 points, 3 assists and 3 rebounds, played tremendous defense as well. Really, really impressive showing for the kid in his hometown. It's also the game in which they concluded, second to last game. Second game was in San Antonio, but it was the last game, second last game in San Antonio. Kind of a high note for him to wrap his season on there in his hometown of Dallas, though. He did play in the San Antonio game, but the high note there at the end is a pretty big deal. As for the Detroit Pistons, now, I don't want to bash him too much. They did have Quentin Grimes as well. He got traded there in midseason, played about 6 games before getting his own injury. But Detroit stunk. Like, there's no way around it. The Pistons were not any good last year. They went 14 and 68. They have a weird roster with a bunch of guards that, frankly, kind of felt logjam for Marcus at the start of the season until kind of midway through, when he kind of found his rhythm rotation that, frankly, kind of worked his way into the lineup a lot more. I'd almost argue that at the start of the season, and I think my analysis stands from last summer, if all of the guards are healthy in Detroit, there was actually too many of them, right? And so I feel somewhat vindicated that a couple injuries and then Marcus working his way in ultimately worked out well for him, because if they just had less guards that needed minutes on the roster at the start of the season, he might have started off that way, maybe hit it by Christmas, right? Hit that stride by Christmas or so. I'm excited to see what year 2 looks like for Marcus. Detroit's going to only get better because they can't get worse. Cade Cunningham coming back healthy will be great. I think Cade and Marcus play really well off of one another, because defensively, Cade Cunningham is like a 6'6"-ish point guard. He can body up with the bigger perimeter guys. Marcus Sasser at 6'3" with long arms can guard more traditional point guard. So while Cade can bring the point up or bring the ball up as the point, I should say, and let Marcus run the 2 guard on offense, they can just switch the coverages on defense and be okay and not be outmatched in terms of size, right? Other great guards in that program as well, obviously, like Jaden Ivey or whatever. Quentin Grimes in the roster helps. I know Quentin and Marcus are close. The coolest thing in that whole trade saga was all the different pictures from the Final Four run, and like those two celebrating the Final Four run, and then like dapping it up because they're excited to be playing together in Detroit as well. I think they get, like I said, better next year because they can't get worse. But mostly I'm watching for Marcus and Quentin to see how things go. I love checking on the NBA. I think the NBA playoffs are the best drama in all of sports. If you want to hear more about different guys, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe we can continue to talk about kind of looking back at how Cougars did in the NBA this year. But in the third and final segment, that's admittedly is a full-on hypothetical sparked by Austin Rivers. But I want to dabble in it. Now, I say that, but I also should point out that first, we mentioned that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, and you probably already can recite what I'm going to say off the top of your head, because talk about how competitive it is, how fun it is, and how there's all these kind of team aspects to it as well. You can play with your friends in time tournaments and work together to build up each other's boards. But I want to stress, the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's no shortage of things to get: different stickers, cool playing pieces, emojis to talk trash with, whatever you want. Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day, with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko. Now, there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win, or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, go download it for free at Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Now, we opened the show talking some about the NIL situation and how in Las Vegas they're actually going to help teach some financial literacy to folks in that tournament. But you have those tools at your own disposal too, and that's the Yahoo Finance. Now, everyone takes care of the money in different ways. You know, I'm a teacher. Money can get tight as a teacher, and you got to make sure you're taking care of it in all of the best ways and best practices. That's why we use Yahoo Finance in our house as well. I've been using Yahoo Finance for a while now to consolidate all the different information, different accounts into one place and keep track of it all in one spot for me. Let's get straight to the point. You want to watch your portfolio grow without having to figure out too many things or take up too much of your time. Yahoo does all of that work for you. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. And whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that, you're just looking for a little extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. The number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, lots more. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets it apart with great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. The community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news, analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor at yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, so I think it started on the Pat McAfee show, but somehow on Tuesday, Austin Rivers went viral, and he went viral for, of course, all the wrong reasons, because that tends to be how these things go. But on the Pat McAfee show, when talking trash to Pat, I'm sure, although I got to be honest, that's not my vibe, not my jam. It might be yours. Maybe you saw the clip, but the show seems to have a lot of trash talk. And Austin said that he can take 30 players in the NBA right now and throw them in the NFL, and that you cannot take 30 NFL players and throw them in the NBA. Now, initially, I got to say, I thought this was ludicrous. And we saw college athlete, super athletic, most athletic he's ever been level of Draymond Green, unable to play college football, right? He went to Michigan State. He just couldn't do it, right? We've seen a number of guys try and do both. You know, Julius Peppers played at North Carolina. He was a childhood idol of mine, honestly, playing both. This kid that grew up playing both myself. I get that there are some comparisons to some athletic things that cross over back and forth, and we're seeing Anthony Edwards take over the NBA playoffs in a way, and he was a high-end football player in high school, and LeBron James was an all-state receiver or whatever, right? All true. I don't think that's worth diving into much further than that. I don't think Austin's right. I think there is such thing as being too tall to play football, especially as a thinner guy like a basketball player is. As a receiver, you're going to get hit in the knees a bunch. How much can your knees take? I also, for what it's worth, think more football players could be point guards and shooting guards than he's giving it credit for, but I digress. I think a more fun thought experiment here. Work with me. is who at the U of H could make that crossover? Hear me out, okay? What if you had J1 Roberts rushing the passer, right? 6'7", long arms, great strength, great toughness, doesn't quit on the play, right? He goes after every single loose ball. That kind of effort rushing the passer. Now, wait a second. I think we're onto something here, right? Like, I think you're seeing what I'm putting down. Like, that's big time potentially, right? And defensive end at 6'7" is tall, but it's not quite like the receiver is going to get his knees hit every play, because ultimately you're not going to get cut block every play. And if you do, there's ways to defeat a cut block that's not quite the same as getting tackled, right? So I think J1 Roberts being a pass rusher is a fun thing to think about mentally. Willie, if the kid wants to stay on campus after he's done playing basketball, maybe we talk about how much football eligibility he has left. Maybe. Now, Jamal Shedd's going into the NBA draft, and I think we'll get drafted in the second round, if not earlier. I could see him being kind of like Marcus, honestly, sneak into late first. Neither here nor there. If he'd wanted to play football, between the leadership, the selflessness, the toughness, I think it's safe to say he could have played. I think it's safe to say he'd be one of the best safeties in the Big 12. The defensive tenacity and the ball hawkishness that is so inherently involved in safeties and the way they play football, I think he's got all that. He had all that on the basketball court. I think that's what makes him a great basketball player, right? Would love to see Jamal Shedd playing some safety. Now, if I want to flip this around, I admit, and I think Austin's point was it gets a little harder, right? Because I think everyone wants to put like the Kevin Durant build guy at a wide receiver and throw jump balls. But truthfully, like I said, that guy's going to get hurt. You can't really include that guy in this. One guy I think could play some basketball is Stephon Boogie Johnson. Boogie is so fast, and such great feet and hands. I think he could be a great like defensive two guard, right? Like he'll get to the basket, he'll attack the rim, put pressure on the rim, etc. Moreover, he's so athletic and so quick. I wonder about could he play that two guard spot? On the inverse of this, I know I mentioned some guys are too tall for football, but Patrick Paul was 6'7". Now Patrick Paul is now a Miami Dolphin, but if we're going to reclaim him as a Houston Cougar, what are those post moves like? He had great balance and leverage as a pass blocker. Even if it wasn't always the most orthodox thing, that his pass blocking, that is. What does that look like with the drop step? What does that look like around the rim? Does he have the same soft hands to flip the ball in on a hook shot? Wait a second now. 6'7", long arms. Sounds like a Houston Cougar basketball player. I mean, really honest, right? Like that's the kind of post player we see Houston go get a lot. I should point out in all this that Nadami Tucker, defensive lineman for Houston, actually was a very talented high school basketball player, right? And so I think it stands to reason that if they were drafting the football team into basketball players, Nadami Tucker would probably be fairly high. And there's probably a number of others that I'm forgetting or not going to have time to sit on. But that's all the time we got today, and I'm excited to think about those kinds of things in the offseason. I love thought experiments like that. If you got someone you think I missed, tell me in the comments down below. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.